All right, well, welcome. We have another wonderful Boston by Foot volunteer tour guide to share their Boston by Foot story with us today. So we have Anne Smagorinsky, and I'd love to get to know Anne a little bit more. So welcome, Anne. Great to
Hello.
do this with you. And so I was wondering to start us off, if you might be able to share a little bit about yourself. Where are you from? Do you live here in Boston? And how long have you been a Boston by Foot volunteer?
Okay, I'll do this chronologically. I grew up in Northern Virginia outside of Washington, D.C., lived a couple of other places in my life, came to Boston over 40 years ago, and it's a place I had always had a yearning to live, and I finally got here. It took me until my adulthood to do so, but I love this city. And when I retired, I was looking for an activity to uh, get me a little more involved in the city and learn more about it. And Boston by Foot just seemed like the perfect opportunity to become more immersed in all things Boston. So I trained 10 years ago, and it's just been a joy.
Well, we love having you here with us, and that's great to hear that kind of you're always intrigued with Boston, always wanted to come here, and since you've been a Boston by Foot volunteer, or again just a 40-year Boston resident at this point, is there anything that you have found that you really now notice about Boston now that you're a volunteer and exploring the city on that deeper level?
Yes, everything above the first story of buildings. I worked in Back Bay for many years. I worked in downtown Boston every years. For many years, I walked out to get my lunch every day, and I was always looking at the first floor of every building I went by. And it's just criminal, but all I saw were kind of modern storefronts. So when I went through my guide training, oh my God, look at these buildings. I feel so chagrined that I walked by them all day long and never appreciated them. So I've spent the last 10 years very much appreciating everything from the second floor up on buildings in Boston.
Oh, I loved that. Yeah, that I think that's one of the great things about Boston by Foot, and one of our other volunteers has this wonderful kind of like terminology they use of like, it really helps people just learn how to look at the city and see what's really here, and I think that's really true. And I know you've also written some tours with Boston by Foot, helping folks see that city on that layered, deeper level. And maybe you could talk a little bit about kind of your tour writing experience, what you've enjoyed about it, some of the tours you've been involved in writing.
Um, Okay, the two tours I've been involved in are Becoming Back Bay, which I co-wrote with two other Boston by Foot members and collaborators. And I just did a refresh really on the Johnny Tremaine's Boston tour, which is a tour of downtown and North End sites that were key in the Revolutionary War buildup and are featured in the children's, well, the young adult book Johnny Tremaine, which has been a favorite of mine since I was a kid. And to be honest, it's one of the reasons I joined Boston by Foot is I saw you had a tour called Johnny Tremaine's Boston. So the experience of just dusting that off in both cases was trying to bring a little bit more of a contemporary sensibility. And it's something that I know has been going on in the organization wholesale for the past 5+ years, is trying to um, make the content, yes, historical, yes, take you back to other times, but also bring a little bit of a 21st century eye to things. So, for example, on the Johnny Tremaine tour, there had been no discussion in the previous tour about the fact that there are 4 or 5 uh, African American characters in the book, but they weren't mentioned on the tour. And to me, it was a fascinating window into the fact that this was a slaveholding town in colonial times, and many of our founding fathers, who we so admire, had enslaved people working in their households. So that was really interesting. As far as the Back Bay tour went, I had been giving the architecturally oriented Back Bay tour for a number of years, but I found that more and more I was gravitating towards more social history than architectural history. So writing the Becoming Back Bay was an attempt to talk more about the role of immigrants and the dynamics between the householders and their household staff, why certain decisions were made that reflected the values of the time and so forth. So, like pretty much every Boston by Foot guide that I've encountered, when you learn a tour, you're just scratching the surface of the material that is available to you, and you find yourself going down so many rabbit holes and finding so much more interesting material that you just can't help but include it in your tours.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. I think, our tour manuals that our guides, make their tours from are so comprehensive, so much information there. But like you said, when you start, you're just scratching the surface. And as you get into that deeper level and, this lifelong learning here that's part of Boston by Foot. And then, yeah, incorporating that into the manual so that future, volunteers and guides can, go deeper on that level too. So yeah, no, I really appreciate you kind of sharing your thought process behind like there's these revisions of these tours because that very much is as you said something that's integral to us here at Boston by Foot and telling
Yeah,
that.
and also I just want to add to clarify a little bit. One of the things that I most appreciate about the experience of being a Boston by Foot tour guide is we're encouraged to make the tours our own. We're not sent out with a manual and say just repeat this verbatim to the people on your tours. We're encouraged to find our own way into the material, to find the aspects that are most resonate with us, and to enhance it with our own research. So it's kind of the opposite of being expected to parrot pre-written material.
Yeah, no, I'm glad to hear you say that how much you enjoy that because I think that's something that many, many, many of our volunteers really appreciate is we don't have scripted tours, but there's tons of support and material to help guides develop those stories and those narratives that resonate with them because when it matters to you, it's a more engaging tour overall. So that's
Absolutely.
awesome to hear. Now, I also know you've been involved in a number of Boston by Foot, in a number of capacities. You talked about your tour guiding a little bit and your tour writing. But I know right now you're also in one of Boston by Foot's kind of more unique but important roles. Would you like to share a little bit about your role as volunteer liaison?
Um, One thing about our board of directors, which are people who may or may not have any background with the day-to-day operations of Boston by Foot. I think by and large they have not been involved in uh, our tours other than perhaps as members of the Tories. And we have an opportunity through this volunteer liaison to the board to make sure that the concerns of the guides on the ground, the things that are um, affecting us and the things that are affecting, more importantly, people on our tours and the experience that they're having. And to bring that information to the board in the hopes that if there are problems that need to be addressed, that they have the information and the tools to understand what to best do to make it a better experience for the people who come on our tours and the people who give them, because we're all volunteers and we're doing this out of our own time and for the love of it.
Yeah,
So
no, thank you.
uh, that's been very both as a member of the volunteer liaison network, which is the people who uh, kind of feed their information into the volunteer liaison, and now the volunteer liaison itself. It's a very hands-on way of working with our guides and working with our public.
Yeah, no, I think that that's such a special role, and we really appreciate, you serving as as the volunteer liaison and being able to bring that volunteer voice, and like you said, that the experience of the folks on our tour to the board of directors. It's because yeah, our board of directors, oversees the organization, but as you said, they're not really involved in the day-to-day operations. That staff, and then our volunteers out there giving tours.
Mhm.
And so, speaking of tours, I was wondering if you might be able to share with us, a favorite tour memory that you have. And you've been guiding tours for a decade now, and we'd love to hear if there's a memorable experience or anecdote you might like to share with us.
The Johnny Tremaine tour is often consists of a family that has read the book together. and they want to share it with their kids. It's not typically assigned in school anymore the way it used to be because it was written in the 1940s and it's not considered a contemporary book. But uh, I've had some kids on these tours, and I'm talking 10-year-olds, 11-year-olds that know more about these topics than I do. And when I talk to them about things that happened during the lead up to the Revolutionary War, which is the time period that the book covers, uh, they're so knowledgeable. They've learned stuff in school. They maybe have visited, if they're local, maybe visited some of the historical sites out in Lexington and Concord or here in Boston. And it just is so thrilling to be with people, first of all, who love this book that I too love, and then to hear that kids that age are so tied in to these historical events and not in a name, date, and place kind of way, the way some of us were taught back in our school days, but really understanding the issues at play.
No, that's wonderful to hear. Yeah, our tours, we do have some, more kind of kid-focused tours, but like you said, all of our tours welcome, children and families as well as adults. And the Johnny Tremain one, I think is so special where it's really catering to that kind of middle school age kids. And that's awesome to hear, and it also ties into our philosophy of that audience-centered, audience-engaged tour experience where we really do want to hear from the folks on our tours and their experiences and what excites them and what they're curious about. And I
Yeah.
love to hear that. That's wonderful. Um, and so that also kind of leads me to being curious about like what is one of your things that you enjoy most about being a Boston by Foot volunteer at this point, of all the different things you've been involved with and do, what do you really love about the organization?
Um, Well, there's a little joke that I sometimes make that caters to two of my main interests, history and showing off. So I guess that's kind of what it is. I get to share history in a really engaging way. Our tours are not the kind where the tour guide stands in front of a horde of people and delivers a lecture. The tours I give, I always consider to be conversations with the people who are on the tour. There's a lot of back and forth. There's a lot of sharing of information. Their questions are always so penetrating and interesting. So that's kind of what the kick for me on giving tours in. And as far as being a member of the organization, I've just made so many friends and had such a wonderful experience engaging with other tour guides. When I first joined it, I thought you learn your tours, you go out, you give your tours all by yourself, you go home, and you don't have too many touch points. But through doing some additional volunteering and from meeting some of the other guides, people make lifelong friends through their training groups, I know. So it's just really enhanced my whole social network here in Boston with like-minded people. I mean, other history geeks. So.
Yeah, that is true. It's very much, a community here at Boston by Foot, and that's wonderful to hear how much those connections, have really mattered to you and continue to matter to you. And so when you're not here at Boston by Foot, though, is there anything you'd like to tell us about kind of like what you do when you're not volunteering? What are things you enjoy or hobbies you might have?
Um, Two of my hobbies are travel and photography, which I tend to combine into photographic trips. I go on trips with photo groups all over the world, some here in the United States and, many other continents. And that is a great joy to me. And I also play bridge. I know that sounds very old-fashioned, but it's a fascinating game that not only keeps your mind really sharp, but has enabled me to have more contact with my sisters in the days of now of playing bridge online. I get to do weekly games with both my sisters, so uh, that's been wonderful on a couple of different counts.
Oh, that is great, being able to connect with family, through these games and stuff. I also know like you've shared with me about some of your trips you've taken, and I love the one you told me about where you were taking photos of this giraffe running across the plains in Africa. That was just sounds like such an amazing trip.
It was fantastic.
And then, to wrap up today, is there anything else you might like to share about yourself or your time here at Boston by Foot?
No, just to say that if you like history or architecture or social history or engaging with people or having conversations or sharing the city or spreading the love of Boston. Not in a, we're not cheerleaders. We're not, no one in Boston ever did anything wrong. This is a flawless city. That's not the case, and we show the city warts and all, but that's a way of understanding our history, our surroundings, and I love to make history very personal and make it be about the people on the ground who live these lives and not just, as I said, the names, dates, and places type of history.
Oh, that's just such a great way to wrap up this guide profile, Anne. And yeah, being folks inspired to share and engage with Boston on that deeper level. I love that. And so thank you so much for sharing your Boston by Foot story with us. It was great to get to know you a little bit better. And we look forward to having you with us here at Boston by Foot for many years to come.
Thank you very much. Great to see you, Katrin.